Three children found out their father was dead, not from a phone call, not in person, but on Twitter. Zachary, Zelda, and Cody Williams watched the world mourn Robin Williams, while they themselves hadn't even begun to process that he was no longer breathing. August 2014. The man who made millions laugh left them with a silence so brutal it still echoes. Robin Williams wasn't just a comic genius. He was a father fighting invisible demons while raising three kids in the eye of the Hollywood hurricane. Zachary, born from his first marriage, Zelda and Cody from his second. Three people who grew up with a last name that weighed like a sentence. This is not just a story about losing an icon. It's about what happens when the funniest man in the world hides the darkest pain, and his children inherit both sides of him. What comes next isn't in the headlines. Here, you'll learn how they lived through the most public grief of the decade, the family conflicts that shattered what remained, and the secrets Robin carried until his last breath. Truths only those who stay until the end will know. Because this story doesn't end with his death. It begins there. August 11th, 2014. 11:35 a.m. Zachary Williams, the eldest son, was in his New York apartment when his phone exploded. Messages, calls, notifications nonstop. He opened Twitter and saw his father's face trending worldwide. Robin Williams, RIP. His heart stopped before his brain could understand. He called his sister. Zelda didn't answer. He called his stepmother. No answer. He called his father's assistant. Silence. He had to read articles written by strangers to confirm that his dad no longer existed. Zelda Williams was 25. She was at home in San Francisco when social media became her worst nightmare. Photos of her father, videos from his films, people crying over a man who to them was a legend and to her was just Dad. And then the trolls came. Anonymous users sent her photoshopped images of Robin's body, cruel memes, messages blaming her, saying that if she'd been closer to him, he might still be alive. Zelda shut off her phone and cried until no tears were left. But the world didn't stop. The world never stops. Cody Williams, the youngest, was 22. He was in class when he found out. A classmate showed him a phone with the headline. Cody stared at the screen, read the words, then simply got up and walked out without saying anything. He wandered the campus for hours. His feet led him to a park where he used to play as a child. He sat under a tree, and there alone, no cameras, no reporters, he felt his life split in two. The before, the after, and a fracture so deep he knew it would never fully close. But what no one knew then, what would take years to uncover, was that Robin Williams had been sending tiny signals, subtle signs invisible to the world. Zachary would remember a phone call from 3 days earlier. His father had asked him not how he was, but whether he was happy. Zachary gave an automatic yes and hung up quickly because he had a meeting. That conversation would haunt him every night for years. Zelda had a text she never answered. Her father had written, "I love you more than words can say." She assumed it was one of those sentimental dad moments. She replied with a heart emoji, nothing more. That emoji became her biggest regret, an empty response to the last "I love you" of his life. Cody kept a photo his father sent the day before. Robin in the backyard, looking at the sunset. No text, just the image. Cody didn't think much of it at the time. Now the photo hangs framed in his living room. He looks at it every morning and wonders what his father wanted to say. If this story is touching you in any way, hit subscribe, because what comes next goes even deeper. The first days after his death were a blur. Zach had to catch an emergency flight to California. On the plane, people recognized him. Some offered condolences. Others asked for selfies. Selfies with the son flying to his father's funeral. He said yes because he didn't know how to say no. He arrived at the family home in Tiburon, California, the same house where Robin had spent his final moments. The doors were surrounded by flowers, hundreds, thousands, stuffed animals, letters, drawings from fans around the world. Zachary had to push through the love of strangers just to go inside and cry for his own father. Zelda didn't leave her house for a week. She turned off her phone, unplugged the internet, locked herself in with her dog, and let grief consume her in private. But the world didn't allow that luxury. Paparazzi camped outside her door. They photographed her taking out the trash, crying in her yard. Those images landed in magazines with headlines like Zelda's Pain or The Devastated Daughter. They turned her mourning into content, into clicks, into money. Cody took refuge with his mother, Marcia Garces, Robin's second wife. She was broken but trying to stay strong for her kids. She cooked, made them tea, told them everything would be okay. But at night, Cody heard her crying through the walls, sobs that cut through the house. He realized no one was okay. No one would be okay for a long time. The funeral was private, very private. Only close family and a few intimate friends. But outside, hundreds gathered. Fans, reporters, camera crews broadcasting live. The three siblings had to enter through a back door to avoid the media circus. Inside, the casket was closed. Robin had left explicit instructions. He didn't want anyone to see his body. He wanted to be remembered as he was, alive, laughing, shining. Zachary spoke first. He had prepared a speech, but managed only 3 sentences before breaking down. He talked about how his father taught him to ride a bike, how he always knew how to make him laugh, even on the worst days, how now the worst days had arrived and Dad wasn't there. He sat down, unable to continue. Zelda didn't speak. She couldn't. She sat between her brothers, staring into nothing, clutching a handkerchief that belonged to her father, one that still smelled like him, his cologne, coffee, home. She squeezed it so hard her knuckles turned white. Cody read a poem he wrote the night before, through tears and anger. It spoke of a man who lit up the world but dimmed in the dark, of a father who saved millions but couldn't save himself, of 3 children learning to live with a giant-sized void. When he finished, the silence in the room was absolute. No applause, no movement, just the weight of grief. But then came something no one expected, something that would turn their mourning into a brutal legal battle. 1 week after the funeral, Susan Schneider, Robin's 3rd wife and widow, filed a lawsuit, not against strangers, against Robin's children, Zach, Zelda, and Cody. The reason? The inheritance. Robin had left a will specifying that his personal items, memorabilia, collections, and certain properties were to go to his children. Susan argued that many of those items were in the home she shared with Robin and were therefore technically part of marital property. She wanted watches, clothing, photos, things that Robin had specifically designated for his children. Zach felt betrayed. Susan had been part of his life during his father's final years. He considered her family, and now she was suing them over watches and shirts. Watches and shirts. While their father was barely gone, while they were still trying to understand that he wasn't coming back. The lawsuit wasn't just legal, it was a knife to the heart. Zelda exploded privately. She told her brothers she couldn't believe this was happening, that their father had been gone mere weeks, and already people were picking at his belongings like vultures. But she also understood these things weren't just objects. They were pieces of Dad, the only tangible parts left, and she wasn't going to let anyone take them away. Cody tried to mediate. He talked to Susan, tried reasoning with her, told her they could reach an agreement without lawyers, without public fights, without staining their father's memory. Susan listened, but didn't budge. She said she had rights, that as the widow she deserved respect, that the children didn't understand what she had lived through with Robin in his final years. Cody hung up the phone and knew this would end in court. The legal battle lasted months. The media covered it like a reality show. The Williams family at war, children versus widow. Headlines turning their pain into entertainment. Details of the lawsuit leaked. The list of disputed items went public. Robin's Rolex watches, the bicycles he used to clear his mind, clothing from iconic films, family photos, everything reduced to a cold inventory and legal documents. Zach had to testify before lawyers. He had to explain why one specific watch meant so much to him. It was the watch his father wore at his high school graduation. Robin had shown it to him after the ceremony and said, "Someday this will be yours." That promise was now being questioned in a courtroom. Zelda had to fight over clothing, outfits her father wore on red carpets, costumes from movies, not because she cared about the monetary value, but because when she held them, she could still feel her dad close. She had to explain that to strangers in suits. She had to defend her grief in legal terms. Cody discovered that even the bicycles were in dispute. His father had a collection of vintage bikes. They used to ride together on Sundays. Those bikes weren't metal and wheels. They were conversations. They were laughter. They were the rare moments when Dad wasn't Robin Williams. He was just Dad. And now a judge would decide who got them. Have you ever felt your grief turn into something else? Felt forced to fight for memories while still trying to process the loss? Leave it in the comments, because what comes next proves this was only the beginning. During the legal battle, something else came to light, something that would forever change the way they understood their father's death. Robin Williams wasn't only suffering from depression, he had Lewy body dementia, a brutal neurodegenerative disease that was destroying his brain. Doctors found it in the autopsy. Robin didn't know for sure, or maybe he suspected, but it had never been diagnosed. The symptoms had been there for months: paranoia, extreme anxiety, insomnia, tremors, memory issues. He thought he was going insane, and in a way, his brain was betraying him. When Zach found out, everything made sense. The strange calls, repetitive questions, the time his father forgot his birthday and then cried while apologizing. Zach had assumed he was busy, distracted. He never imagined Robin's mind was collapsing from the inside. Zelda read everything she could about the disease, every symptom, every stage, and realized her father must have been terrified. Lewy body dementia causes hallucinations, confusion, loss of motor control. Robin Williams, the man whose entire life centered around his brilliant mind, was watching it disintegrate, and he told no one. He carried that terror alone. Zelda cried for days imagining the silent hell her father lived through. Cody was angry, not at his father, but at the universe, at the cruelty of giving such a good man such a horrific ending. Lewy body dementia has no cure. It only gets worse. Robin knew he would eventually stop recognizing his kids, forget who he was, and decline slowly while remaining aware of it. He chose to end things on his own terms. Cody understood that, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. Susan Schneider, the widow, spoke publicly about the disease too. She said Robin had been suffering, that doctors couldn't diagnose him, that he was desperate for answers, that the night before he died he told her he loved her and was sorry. She didn't know why he apologized. Now she did. The children watched that interview and, for the first time since the lawsuit, felt empathy for Susan. She had been there. She had witnessed Robin fall apart without knowing why. The legal battle finally settled out of court. They reached an agreement. Susan kept the house and some personal items. The children received the collections, the film clothing, and the specific mementos Robin had left for them. There were no winners, only broken people dividing the remains of someone they loved. But here's something almost no one knows. Something Zach revealed years later in a little scene interview. Zachary found a box in his father's studio, a simple wooden box with no label hidden behind books. Inside were letters Robin had written but never sent. One for each child, dated a week before his death. Zach opened his with trembling hands. His father wrote about pride, about how watching Zach become a man was his greatest joy, about how he regretted not being more present when Zach was young, when divorce and career consumed him. He apologized. He told him he loved him. He ended with a line, "Be happier than I was able to be." Zach couldn't read any further. He called Zelda and told her about the box. She rushed over and found her letter. Her father wrote about guilt, about how carrying the name Williams was a burden he never wanted to impose on her, about how he saw her artistic talent and feared she felt pressured to reach his level. He told her she was already enough, had always been enough, that she didn't need to be anyone but Zelda. The letter ended with, "The world will compare you to me. Don't listen. You are the light. I was only the reflection." Cody received his letter from Zach. He read it alone in his car. His father wrote about the future, about how Cody was the calm one, the reflective one, and how that was a strength. He told him he didn't have to go into entertainment if he didn't want to, that he could be anything, that their last name was a name, not a destiny. Then came the line that shattered him. "Forgive me for leaving. Forgive me for not being strong enough to stay. But understand, my brain was no longer mine, and I didn't want you to see me become someone unrecognizable. Cody cried until he lost his voice. Those letters were never made public. The siblings chose to keep them private. They were theirs, the last gift from their father. The words they needed, and although they didn't erase the pain, they made sense of the silence. Life went on, because grief doesn't let you pause. Zach returned to his life in New York, working as a producer. After his father's death, he buried himself in work. Project after project, meeting after meeting. Anything to avoid thinking, feeling. His friends told him to take a break. He said he was fine, but he wasn't. Nights were the worst. When work ended and silence filled the room, that's when Dad appeared, in memories and regrets, in the conversations they would never have. Zelda tried returning to social media. She had been very active before her father's death, sharing art, projects, thoughts. But after the brutal harassment she experienced, the idea of opening Twitter gave her anxiety. She finally returned a year later, posting a simple message: "I'm back, stronger thanks to those who waited." The comments were full of love, but some trolls returned too. She blocked them without reading. She'd learned she owed them nothing. Her healing was not a public spectacle. Cody finished college. He graduated with honors. His family attended the ceremony. Zach, Zelda, his mother, Marcia. They all cried when Cody crossed the stage. They left an empty seat between them on purpose. For Dad. Because even in his absence, he took up space. After the ceremony, they went to dinner. They talked about Robin. They laughed, remembering his jokes. They cried, remembering his absence. And for the first time since he died, it felt like a family again. Broken, but a family. Years passed. 2, 3, 5. The pain didn't disappear, but it changed. It became less sharp, more familiar. Like a scar that no longer hurts but never leaves. Each sibling found their own way to honor their father. Zach produced documentaries, one on mental health, another on Lewy body dementia. He used the platform his name gave him to educate others, to prevent families from facing what they faced without answers. Zelda joined charitable organizations, especially those focused on suicide prevention and neurodegenerative diseases. She spoke publicly about her experience. Not everything, but enough to let others know they weren't alone. That grief is complicated, that it's okay to not be okay. Cody stayed more private. He worked in tech, far from entertainment and spotlights. He gave occasional small interviews, speaking about his father with love, but also honesty. He said Robin wasn't a saint. He was human, with flaws and battles, and that didn't make him lesser. It made him real. But there was still something all three carried, something that took years to name: survivor's guilt. Why were they still here and their father wasn't? Why did they have a future he chose not to stay for? It was irrational. They knew that. But feelings don't respect logic. Zach felt guilty for not noticing the signs. Zelda for not replying to more messages. Cody for not calling more often. Each carried their own version of, if only. Therapy helped. All three sought professional support. They learned they couldn't have saved him, that his illness was larger than love, that he made a decision and they weren't responsible. They learned, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are worlds apart. There were hard moments. Robin's birthdays without him, anniversaries of his death, random days when something small, a song, a smell, a joke, dragged them back into fresh grief. Zach once broke down in a supermarket when "Don't Worry, Be Happy" played over the speakers. He had to run outside. Zelda avoided watching her father's movies. She couldn't. Seeing him alive, young, brilliant, knowing he was gone, it was too much. Cody kept videos on his phone, birthdays, Christmases. He watched them when he missed his father's voice. They were his way of keeping him close. And then something unexpected happened. Something beautiful in the middle of pain. Zelda received an email. A museum in Los Angeles was planning an exhibition about Robin Williams. They wanted to include personal items, film costumes, awards, and they wanted the family involved. Zelda called her brothers. Zach was hesitant. Were they really turning their father into an exhibition? Nostalgia tourism? Cody suggested they at least hear the proposal before deciding. They met with the curators. The exhibition wouldn't just be about Robin the actor, it would be about Robin the human. It would include information about mental health, about Lewy body dementia, about the importance of talking openly about suicide. It would be educational. It would be honest. The siblings looked at each other and said yes. They worked with the museum for months deciding what to include and what to protect. Some things were too personal, but others felt like the world needed to see them. The jacket from Good Will Hunting, the wig from Mrs. Doubtfire, family photos showing the dad behind the icon, letters from fans that Robin had saved. Everything presented with context and respect. The exhibition opened in 2021. It was emotional. Thousands of people attended. Fans of Robin, people who had never met him but grew up with his movies, people who had also lost someone to suicide and found comfort knowing they weren't alone. The three siblings went to the opening. They walked through the exhibition, seeing their father through the eyes of strangers. It was strange, but also healing. To see how many lives he touched, to realize his legacy wasn't only pain, but joy, hope, laughter. Zelda stopped in front of a photo. It was of her and her father on a film set. She was 15. Robin was hugging her, both smiling. She didn't remember that exact moment, but seeing it brought back the feeling, pure, unconditional love, and for the first time in years, she smiled without guilt. Zach found a video, Robin improvising jokes backstage at a show, laughing, being himself. Zach had forgotten that laugh, the real one, not the performance, the dad one. He let himself remember him that way, happy, even if just for a moment. Cody read letters from fans, people whose lives Robin had touched without ever knowing. A soldier who watched Good Morning, Vietnam, and didn't give up. A little girl who watched Flubber during chemotherapy and forgot the pain for a while. A father who learned how to express emotions after watching Dead Poets Society. Robin had been more than entertainment. He had been medicine. Cody cried reading those letters. Cried from sadness, but also from pride. The exhibition was a success. It traveled to other cities, reached millions, and the siblings finally felt they had done something right. Something that honored their father without exploiting him. Something that shared his light without hiding his darkness. But the story doesn't end there, because there was something else the world didn't know. Robin Williams left a recording his children found years after his death. Not a video, audio, a voice memo on his phone, dated 2 days before he died. They found it by accident. Zach was going through old files when it appeared. At first, he hesitated to open it. He called his siblings. The three of them met. They put the recording on speaker and listened. Robin's voice was soft, tired. He spoke slowly. He said he knew something was wrong with him, that his mind wasn't working right, that he was scared. Scared of losing who he was. Scared of becoming a burden. Scared that his children would remember him confused and frightened instead of happy and strong. He said he loved them more than words could express, that his greatest achievement wasn't movies or awards. It was them, Zach, Zelda, Cody. He said he felt like he was letting them down by not being able to fight anymore, but that he was so tired, so tired. The recording lasted 4 minutes. It ended with Robin quietly crying, whispering, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. The siblings cried like they hadn't cried since the funeral. It was devastating to hear their father's pain, but it was also what they needed. Confirmation that it wasn't a lack of love. It was an excess of suffering, that he didn't want to leave. His brain forced him to. And that truth, in a twisted way, brought peace. They kept the recording. They never made it public. It was their secret, their father's last gift, the words they needed to finally let go of the guilt. Today in 2025, 11 years later, the siblings live their lives. Zach produces meaningful content. Zelda creates art and advocates for mental health. Cody raises his son far from the spotlight. They didn't get over their father's death. You don't get over something like that. They learn to live with it, to carry the weight without letting it crush them. They speak about him openly without fear or shame. They say he had depression. They say he had a horrible illness. They say he chose to end his suffering. They say they wish he had chosen differently and that they understand why he didn't, and that it's okay to feel all of that at once. Robin Williams' legacy isn't just his films, it's the conversation his death sparked about mental health, about invisible illnesses, about how the brightest people can be fighting the darkest battles. His children made sure of that. They took the pain and turned it into purpose. But there's a question that remains, one Zach asked in a recent interview. How many people are suffering in silence right now? How many Robin Williamses are out there with no voice? What can we do so no one feels like the only escape is the end? And then he added, if we can save even one life by telling our story, then Dad's pain wasn't in vain. That's the truth the headlines never captured. That the three children of Robin Williams took the worst experience of their lives and turned it into a mission. Not to canonize their father, but to humanize him. To show others that suffering doesn't discriminate, that you can have success, money, fame, and still feel broken, and that asking for help isn't weakness, it's strength. Zach now works with mental health organizations. He funds research into Lewy body dementia. He wants treatments to exist, wants hope, wants no one else to face the choice between living with a collapsing brain or ending things before losing themselves completely. Zelda uses her platform to amplify voices, not just her own. She shares stories of other survivors of suicide loss, of people living with mental illness, of families trying to rebuild. She became a bridge, a beacon, proof that it's possible to survive the unbearable. Cody teaches his son about emotions. He tells him it's okay to cry, okay to be afraid, that men don't have to be strong all the time, that asking for help is smart. It breaks cycles, creates new patterns. He makes sure his son grows up in a world where mental health isn't taboo, and together, the three of them keep one essential truth alive. Robin Williams was extraordinary, but he was also human. And humans struggle, humans break, humans sometimes can't find a way out. But that doesn't define their entire existence. His life was more than his death. His love was more than his pain. His light was real, even if it shared space with darkness. 11 years later, the world remembers Robin Williams with affection. People watch marathons of his movies, share memes of his jokes, celebrate his genius. But his children remember something more. They remember the dad who took them to the park, who used silly voices to make them laugh, who hugged them tight and told them they could be anything. The dad who fought demons bigger than himself. The dad who left before those demons won completely. And the dad who, even in absence, taught them the most important lesson. Vulnerability is human, and it's okay not to be okay. This is the story you never saw in the headlines. The story of three people who lost their father in front of the whole world, who had to fight legal battles while grieving, who found secret letters and final recordings, who turned pain into purpose, who decided Robin Williams' story wouldn't end in tragedy, but in legacy, in conversation, in change. And maybe, just maybe, there's another story waiting to be told. Another family, another struggle, another secret that needs light. Because if Zachary, Zelda, and Cody Williams taught us anything, it's that the hardest stories are the ones that need to be heard the most. The ones that remind us that we are all more than our worst moments, that love survives loss, and that even in the darkest darkness, someone, somewhere, is always searching for the light. What story do you think deserves to be told? Leave it in the comments. And if this one affected you, subscribe, because there are more truths waiting, more voices that need to be amplified, and more reasons to believe that while pain is inevitable, the way we choose to carry it can change everything.